So welcome back. Good. Hope you had a lovely lunch. A bit of fresh air, always nice. It's a good habit to get into before you start anything that's important, to take refuge. Not just in class, you know, not even just before you do a meditation at home, but actually before anything that's important. Doing refuge really sets the mind on the right course. It's a good habit to get into, very good habit to get into, taking refuge. So what we'll do now is we'll do the short refuge prayer 3 times. I've opened most of the books at the right page, about 34, 35. And like most things we do, even prayers, the words are helpful, the feeling is important. Sangye chodam soke chonam la janchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinso ke pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupar sho sangye chodam soke chonam la janchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinso ke pe sonam ki drola penchir sange drupar sho sange chodam soke chonam la janchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinso ke pe sonam ki drola penchir sange drupar sho. You'll notice with most Tibetan prayers, when you do it in Tibetan, the end tends to trail off. You notice that? It's meant to be quite auspicious. Something about coming back and finishing it, you know. But there's something, and if the lamas are doing it particularly, the last half a line, it kind of trails off. And if you don't know, you're sort of going, what happened? You know, but you'll find that with most Tibetan prayers, it kind of tails off towards the end. Okay. So back to Bodhicitta. Right. Can I ask you to hand that out for me? I'd like you to look at these handouts. And we're looking at the front part that says presenting the path, Lam Rim. When we talk about methodology in developing bodhicitta, it's good to understand where this comes from. Now, you probably know that the Dharma was flourishing Tibet at the 8th century. I mean, King Trizon Detsen, Guru Rinpoche time. Dharma was flourishing. Yes? Very, very good. Then about the 9th century, there was a king came to power called King Langdharma. And he abolished Dharma. He destroyed all Dharma. He abolished the Sangha. And during his reign, and for at least 70 years afterwards, there was no active Dharma in Tibet. None. Now, there's long stories behind this, but eventually Lama Atisha in the 9th, 10th century came. And that was the time of a revival of Dharma. And because there'd been such a long time of Dharma being abolished, no Sangha, when it started to flourish again, there was a lot of difficulties. There were people hadn't had a lot of teaching. There'd been generations growing up without teaching, so they were doing what they remembered, what the old people remember, and there were mistakes. Some of it was mixed up with black magic, and that tended to come with, as soon as Dharma started to flourish again in Tibet, teachers came from India, and they were after, basically, they were after gold. Tibet was known for its gold. And they would sell a lot of teachings, and there was a lot of errors, a lot of errors. At that time, there was also sacrifice. There were people felt if you practiced sutra, you couldn't practice tantra. If you practiced tantra, you couldn't practice sutra. There was a lot of errors. And so by the time King Yeshe and his nephew Janchobo, they were actually responsible for Lama Atisha coming to Tibet. And the idea was to come to Tibet and sort out the Dharma, sort out the errors. And Lama Atisha was requested, please, can you produce something that's easy to understand, good to practice, that has no errors, that will have a path very clear. And so this is why he composed a very short text called Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Okay. Now, one of the things Lama Atisha saw, if you look at the front part of what I've given you, he saw there was two main lineages at that time. Lineages not just for bodhicitta, but lineages for the Dharma. And one lineage, both lineages came from the Buddha. But what was happening is, if you were practicing the wisdom profound path, Buddha, Manjushri, Nagarjuna, etc., then you didn't practice the other, the method. You didn't do it. And it was Lama Atisha who saw the error of this. And so he's the one that combined both in relation to the Lam Rim. And so combined both wisdom and method, so that there was very few errors. Now, in the same with the whole of the Buddha's practice, the same within bodhicitta. So if you turn over, you'll see the lineage that was practicing the method, the profound method, was called training the mind in sevenfold cause and effect. And here were the areas. They want to develop bodhicitta. What do I study? What do I meditate on? And what do I wish to achieve on the stages to bodhicitta? So through the method stage, here's where the emphasis was: recognizing all living beings had been our mothers, remembering the kindness of mothers, developing the wish to repay the kindness of mothers, developing affectionate love, developing great compassion, developing superior intention, and developing bodhicitta. This is how they practiced. Then you had the wisdom lineage. And what were their main practices? The Kadampa Geshes. They were practicing this: equalizing self and others, contemplating the disadvantages of self-cherishing, contemplating the advantages of cherishing others, and a practice called taking and giving. That was their main practice. And Lama Atisha, in his wisdom, combined both methods. Why? It wasn't to placate everybody and say, well, we'll just add this onto this. No. He looked at it and he said both, and people practicing these both were achieving bodhicitta, but there was room for misunderstanding. There was room for misunderstanding. If you look at the first bit, training the mind in sevenfold cause and effect. Now, I'm not saying that's not effective. It's very effective. But you will notice in there's a lot of I. Recognizing that all living beings have been like my mother. Remembering the kindness of my mother. There's a lot of I in that. Do you see? No? There is, the sense of self is quite strong here. Effective, certainly. When you look at training the mind and equalizing and exchanging self with others, the majority of this is about understanding the nature of the I, the nature of the self. By combining both wisdom and method, he combined both compassion and love. He combined both. So there was no way of falling through the net. There was no way of developing a very deep wisdom, but the compassion on the weak side. And there was no way of developing strong compassion, but wisdom being on the weak side. And so by combining both these methods, the chances of falling through the net are quite slim. So that's why he combined the two, and he combined it in such a way that it was much easier to understand and much easier to practice. And so to this date, now when Lama Atisha was alive, and he changed all this, everybody practiced. Well, I say everybody, but most people then started practicing the combination, the 11 points. When Lama Atisha died, people went back to doing what they always did. Yeah, human nature. And then when Lama Tsongkhapa came along and instigated the Galupa school of Tibetan Buddhism, he saw very clearly, very, very clearly, the wisdom of Lama Atisha's approach. Complete. And so once again, in Tibet, this combination of wisdom and method was taught, and particularly adhered to in the Galupa school. So Lama Atisha started it. When he died, it kind of, people went back. But by the time of Tsongkhapa, seeing the wisdom of it, he brought it back together. And from then on, certainly within the Galupa, it's taught in this methodology. Now, that's not to say there are some people who look at the combination of the two and find more benefit in certain meditations than in others. They do that. The idea is to practice all of them, yes? And then see where your wisdom takes you. For some people, they'll get some of it very, very quickly. Others will have to take longer on some bits. Some people will find, for instance, recognizing that all sentient beings have been our mother as being quite profound. I've had people say to me that changed their whole life. I have other people that go, "You're kidding me." I find that very, very difficult. That one thing is said to be so difficult. I mean, even in Lama Atisha's time, recognizing that all sentient beings have a mother, that it's one of the most difficult things to understand and to realize within the Dharma. So this is not an easy one. It's actually quite difficult. So as you go through that and you become familiar with it, there will be certain meditations that will push you along the path and others that doesn't seem to work. Does that make sense? It's good to practice all of them, but some of them, once you know what you're doing, some of them you may just touch on lightly because you're kind of there already. You know what I mean? You kind of get it, but you need more working on this. So you have to kind of taste it and see. Okay. Any questions about that combination? Because within the Galupa, when you see it, they'll talk about 11 points. Then you might see something that talks about the 7 points or equalizing and exchanging. I need you to understand where it's coming from and the fact that they've been combined in the 11 points. Nothing's missed out. Okay? Okay, good. In the combination of the two, the very first step is equanimity. Equanimity. This is crucial. You never miss this step out. And in fact, before you do any of the other meditations, you tend to do, even quite briefly, a meditation on equanimity. Without equanimity, nothing else works. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, on the ground of equanimity, pour the water of love, plant the seed of compassion. From this, the harvest of bodhicitta grows. Now, he wasn't, I mean, he was a very poetic monk, but he was actually telling you the sequence. On the ground of equanimity, get that right. Pour the waters of love, plant the seed of compassion. From this, the harvest of bodhicitta grows. So equanimity, vital. Now, when we think of equanimity, when we're being equitable, then we tend to have a feeling of it being kind of neutral feeling, yes? Sort of not too angry, not too sad, that's equity. In common usage, that's true, but it has nothing to do with bodhicitta. This is not the equitable, this is not equanimity in relation to bodhicitta. Okay? So the basis of true equanimity is what's called equanimity of compositional factors. Now, what does this mean? What this means is, it is a mind without agitation, without dullness that can focus. It's actually the basis of shamatha. So we're not talking about feeling kind of neutral here. Nothing to do with bodhicitta. It's good, but it's not. So one of the ways of equanimity in relation to bodhicitta, the very ground, is this kind of compositional equanimity. A mind that is not dull. A mind that is not agitated. And we talked about dullness and agitation, do you remember? These are your two main problems. So this doesn't have that. It's a mind that's focused. It's a mind that really is developing shamatha. On the basis of that, then comes immeasurable equanimity. Immeasurable. And remember that word, it crops up a lot. And one of the ways that it's immeasurable is how it's directed. How it's directed to every sentient being without exception. Not just being equitable with a friend or a group of people, but with every single sentient being without exception. Because it's a lack of equanimity that makes us partial. It's a lack of equanimity that makes us agitated, liking one person and not another. If you're partial, if you have a group of people you like and dislike and are neutral towards, where's the equanimity? And so, when we talk about equanimity in relation to bodhicitta, we're talking about compositional. I always remember it by thinking, I compose my mind. I compose my mind. So a mind that's not agitated, it's not dull, and it's, trying to develop itself through meditation on shamatha. Then it's immeasurable. It has to be immeasurable. And there are many ways to be immeasurable, but one of the ways we're looking at here is immeasurable sentient beings. And we have to think that you can do this because in countless lifetimes, and when we say countless, we're not talking about big number here, we're talking about countless. The basis is that everyone has been your mother. Everyone has been your dearest child. The only difference is we don't remember. We just don't remember. And because we don't remember, we allow partiality to come in. We like some, we don't like another, kind of indifferent to the majority. So it's only the fact that we can't remember. And the teachings say things like, even if you have a mother now, or a father you're very, very close to, they tend to use mothers more, and your mother's dead, do they stop being your mother? Well, no. But you still have a memory of your mother. It could be 10, 20, 30 years gone. But that love, that feeling is still there. The only reason we don't have it towards each other is because we don't remember. So immeasurable equanimity is very, very important. That word is important, immeasurable. Now, there are many ways to develop and many meditations that will help us develop equanimity. Many. It's said by the great teachers that the most effective way is to use impermanence. See the impermanent nature of things. And that's very, very helpful. So what we're going to do now is a meditation on equanimity. Let's see where it's taking us. Now, when we talk about this, it's like everything else in the Lam Rim. You need to study it, you need to discuss it, you need to reflect on it, you need to meditate. So it's, it's not just listening to meditations. Okay, so let's look at that. So just take a few minutes to settle the body and settle the mind. If you like, use the 2-breath method. That's very good to calm the body, breathing in through both nostrils, allowing your belly to fill, and then out through pursed lips for a long out breath, allowing your body to relax, and then once more, and then breathe normally. So starting with the analytical component, the active, creative part of the mind, we visualize that sitting in front of us, straight in front of us, is a complete stranger. Well, let's say someone that you may pass in the street but never even notice. Just someone that you have no feeling for one way or another, quite strange to you, sitting in front looking directly at you. Now, to your left, again, facing towards you, is someone you have a very strong attachment to. A very strong attachment. They're sitting there. And at the other side, sitting, facing you, is someone to whom you have quite a strong aversion. You all know that person. Yeah. They're sitting there. Using your intelligence, your creativity, your feelings, your memory, examine closely why you have these feelings towards these three people. What is it that has made this person more or less an enemy, someone that you really want to avoid? What is it? What has happened to make the other person a close friend, someone you're attached to? And why do you have a kind of neutral feeling towards the one right in front of you, the stranger? Examine it closely. Ask yourself these questions. Why? What are the source of these feelings? What happened? This can be difficult because it's almost as if you've labeled them and then you believe the label. But examine the reasons. And now with honesty, ask yourself, Are these categories true? Using your wisdom eye, look again. How true are these categories, these labels that we've given? Are these labels that we've given, are they permanent or are they impermanent? Consider. Is it possible that these categories, these labels, is it possible that they're false? Our attitude to sentient beings tend to be governed by these labels. Begin to feel how unbalanced that actually is. And recognize that this unbalanced feeling, this unbalanced approach, is the main obstacle to the Mahayana path, the main obstacle. It's what keeps us circling in samsara. It's what keeps us ignorant and gives rise to the poisons of attachment and aversion. This and no other. This false discrimination allows self-cherishing to arise strongly. The sense of I becomes very firm. And when you have a strong sense of I, you have a strong sense of me and mine. Try to feel that evolution. Feel how it gives rise to attachment, self-grasping at my happiness. How that leads to greed. See how all the negative emotions come from this. See how I create my friends. Those who pander to my self-cherishing, who do what I want, who give me what I want. I create friends. And with this self-cherishing attachment, anyone that interferes with that, I label enemy. And anger, aversion arises from that. So I create enemies. From self-cherishing attachment and greed, I create the friend that helps and the enemy that hinders. Reflect on that. The majority of sentient beings in all the 6 realms, we happily label as strangers. It's our ignorance that labels it like this. When we're talking about ignorance, we're not talking about stupidity. We're talking about misknowing of reality. Because I follow these negative, self-created labels, I create suffering for myself and all other beings. This is where it comes from. I'm acting in a way that endangers myself and endangers the whole earth. Being attached offers no peace at all. It just leads to say more of the same. If I continue in this way, bodhicitta, enlightenment is impossible. Try to get a feeling of that. Spend some minutes reflecting on the points that make more sense to you, the points that affect you more than others. Just reflect on it now. Bring it clearly to your mind. If I continue in this way, bodhicitta, enlightenment, impossible. If you come to a point in your meditation that seems a reasonable thing, then just focus on that. Just try to hold that gently with your mind. having a taste of that this unbalanced attitude is the source of all our problems. Reflecting again on the main points. Try to build up a determination, something along the lines of, I shall free my mind from this unbalanced attitude. I will reduce my attachment, my aversion, my ignorance. I will do that. I will not have that attitude towards any living being. Try to build up a strong determination. I will be more equitable. And when that feeling is as strong as you can make it, let the chatter die away and focus. If the mind wanders, just gently bring it back. For the next 5 minutes only, try to hold that determination not to have such a negative attitude to sentient beings, and the determination to be more equitable. If your mind wanders and you come back and you haven't got that feeling anymore, then go over the main points again until that arises. But for the next 5 minutes, make your focus, I will be more equitable. It makes sense. And gently hold that with your mind. Just 5 minutes. Keep bringing your mind back. Now consider, in previous lives, your best friend of this life has been your worst enemy in previous lives. You have a connection, but not always positive. And the person that you have a strong aversion to in this life might have been your best friend or your mother in a previous life. In this lifetime, how many close friends have become someone that you're averse to? Within a day that can happen. And how many times has someone that you really dislike have done something and become suddenly a friend? It can happen in a day. And the truth is, it doesn't take much for us to swap labels, not much at all. There is no certainty. Get a sense of how fragile these labels, how impermanent, how easily they can change and transform. With this fluidity, there's no sense in attachment, aversion, indifference. Really, no sense. Try to develop the idea. I will develop strong, warm, loving relationships with sentient beings. I will develop this attitude towards all living beings. This is wisdom. Try and generate that feeling. Make it as strong as you can. And when it's as strong as you can, let everything else go. And for 5 minutes, try to hold that in your mind. Coming back when you need to, generating the feeling again when you need to. But for the next 5 minutes, focus. Thank you. First thing in the afternoon, not so easy to do meditation. But are you getting the idea of the analytical mixing with the single pointed, going back to the analytical when you need it? That's useful. Okay. So like I say, there are many ways to meditate on equanimity. This is one of them. And because there's a strong element of impermanence, it can be very effective. So in 2s and 3s, no surprise, I'd like you to discuss how that went. Now, instead of a general discussion, although that will happen, I want you to really focus on how permanent are these labels? How much do we invest in these labels? How true are they? Is it possible they're false? And if it is, why? Okay. We've got to it's important to shake this idea of permanence, of that's who you are. You're a friend because of you. You're an enemy because that's just who you are, really. And for the majority of the world, we have to get the idea that we're creating this. And we've got to get the idea that it's very fluid. Look how easy it is for a friend to become an enemy. How many times have someone that you thought would be with your closest friend for the rest of your life, you don't even see them now? In fact, if you pass them in the street, they'd be a stranger. How many times has your best friend done something and become quite a bad enemy? And how many times is someone that you thought you'd never like? So how permanent are these categories? How much should we invest in them? Okay? See what came up in your meditation. So let's say 5-10 minutes. Try to keep to that area. That would be good. Thank you. So, like I say, there are variations on this particular meditation. You might find another one that's more useful to you. The thing to do is try them all, see what works, but know what you're aiming for. Know what you're aiming for. So how did your discussion go? What type of things came out of your discussion? I'll point a finger. See, it's the finger, it's the magic of the finger. Threaten them with the finger.
We talked about many things, but one of them was that it's really difficult with a person where you only know the bad side, say a politician or something, where you just have an image that you've got from whatever you've heard, and you don't know that they have any good qualities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really difficult with that person.
Yes, yes. So sometimes when it comes like that, some of the initial stages are quite helpful. So things like avoiding that particular individual. I'm not just talking about politician, but anyone. Avoiding, yeah, or trying to generate a more neutral feeling. And understanding. You see, you know, the Buddha said, if you walked in someone else's shoes, you wouldn't make these judgments. Somewhere this person is loved. This person is loved. Very few people in this world isn't. This is someone's son or daughter. They have children that think the world of them. The world.
They are the world.
They are the world, yeah. So what makes our judgment real? What makes it true? This is not saying you don't have feelings about it. I have quite strong feelings on quite a few things. But it doesn't make it true. You don't have to believe it. It doesn't make it true.
No, we talk about a good starting place would be to just try not to judge them.
That's
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the thing about the Dharma, if you do nothing else, don't harm anyone. I mean, if you do nothing else, that's basic, you know. But sometimes putting something else into the mix. So not harming, perhaps avoiding particular situations or individuals might be useful to start with. But if you bring your wisdom into it, you know that this entity, this individual, is no more your enemy, no more someone who is an integral, permanent cause of your unhappiness. It's not true. I mean, it really just isn't true. Meditation will make that very clear. That doesn't stop us feeling this, but it isn't true. So what you try and do is let your wisdom come into fore here. Instead of going on habit, instead of going on instinct, try to go more on wisdom. And if you start saying to yourself, I mean, being realistic, there are people who love this individual. To them, that's their own. What makes their judgment of that person less than yours? What makes yours more than them? I'll tell you what makes the difference. My creation of that label. My self-cherishing. That's the difference. We don't want to think that. What we want to think is, it's them. From a young child, we learn very quickly to say it wasn't me. It wasn't me. We'll blame anybody else plus an imaginary friend. Where does this come from? It comes from past lives, what we do. We have no problem saying that we create our own friends. I mean, it's not too difficult, you know. But even suggest to someone that we create our own enemies, people are not happy. They're not happy because these people are in and of themselves enemies. No, they're not. This is not wisdom, and it isn't true. So sometimes putting some wisdom into the mix, having some idea of self-cherishing, that you're creating this, having some idea of impermanence, that can break down a lot of barriers. If you employ impermanence a lot, it starts to deconstruct things. It's almost like, you know how you see fast forward of a film of a building being built? With impermanence, it's like deconstructing. It's almost as if it's deconstructing in front of you. It's almost impossible with impermanence to see something as a permanent entity. It's very hard. You have to work really hard to do that. So throwing that type in the mix is very important. You have to be active here. You have to be active. We've got to counteract lifetime after lifetime of ignorance. We need to counteract that. But we've got help, our Buddha nature. Now, Buddha nature helps. It recognizes this. If we didn't have it already, we couldn't do it. What else were coming up? It's a good point, though. Eh? What else is coming up in your meditations?
The last point that we left off on. I'd like someone else to talk.
Archer, okay.
But we talked about the same thing, that terrorists have mothers too. So if somebody loves them
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
Even though it's very difficult for us to see, because
Yeah.
we're against their action. And we also talked about if there's something called real evil, or if it depends on the point of view that you have.
Wow, interesting. Evil's very emotive, isn't it? It's a very emotive word.
Very what?
Emotive. It generates a lot of emotion, the word evil. You can think like that, but I think there's no such thing as an evil person. I think that's not true. People who do evil things, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe what you were going to say was, we only see, for example, using the terrorists as an example, we only see them in that, from that action or from that window, and that's the label that we put them on.
Yeah.
We don't think about that they were once a 2-year-old little boy or girl playing in the street with their brothers and sisters, and they have a mother who loves them, and people who support them. And we only see them in that one small context, and that's the label that we put them on.
Yeah. But it's hard, isn't it? Especially when it's heavy stuff like that.
Exchanging, let's put it directly, we took the worst guy we could think of, going, he happened to be Hitler, so, but could we exchange ourselves with Hitler? Do we think that with causes and conditions and ripening karma, we could have been in his position? We could do such terrible things if the world was as it was, and
Interesting.
we were in an extreme situation. Could we behave like that? That was difficult. And then he said, well, what about Mother Teresa?
What about her?
Could we exchange ourselves with her?
Would you want to?
Could we imagine that we could do good? If
Oh,
the
really?
conditions
Okay.
were right. If our motivation was strong enough. Oh, yes, great, yes. So what's the difference? That I can't exchange one. Actually, I think I could exchange myself with someone who's capable of quite drastic actions, and also exchange myself with someone who's capable of quite good actions.
Okay, it's a good point, yeah? With some understanding of karma, I think you can legitimately say there is no negative action that you have not committed. I think that's quite legitimate over countless lifetimes. I think that's legitimate. It's a legitimate thing to say.
That's equanimity. That's equanimity.
But it's true. I mean, it's true. Because everything is dependently arising. If you have compassion in your heart, you have the ability to have great compassion in bodhicitta. This is true. But if you have enmity in your heart for anything, a dislike, an anger, even in a partiality, from that can grow a holocaust. It's poison. You see, this is the thing. It's poison. We don't see it as poison because we're not that bad. But it's nothing but poison. I see things like on a continuum. I would never be that bad, But I don't know. I mean, when I was at school, it was quite a rough area. And so there was a lot of fighting. I had no real, fear in my heart or anything like that. But I got into a lot of fights because it was just the nature of how things were. But when I got into a fight, you put someone down and they stayed down. Otherwise, you were in a lot of trouble. Now, I remember that from when I'm 7, 8, 9 years old. How close is that to what's happened in Scotland recently? A 16-year-old stabbing another 16-year-old in the heart over an argument about a biscuit. This has happened in Aberdeen recently. The boy's just been, 16-year-old's just been sentenced. An argument over a biscuit. This person felt under threat. He was a bit of a bully, but he himself was bullied, so he always carried a knife. And he killed this 16-year-old. Where does it all come from? No one is doing it to us. There's no big bad wolf out there that's doing it to us. We are doing it to ourselves. Do I think we're capable of it? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And if I haven't done it in this lifetime, I'm sure I've done it in other lifetimes. Why? Because the remnants of it are with me now. How hard is it not to be angry? How hard is it not to get too greedy? Not to eat too much? Not to slander people? You know, when you get together and somebody's name comes, how difficult is it? Oh, did you know what they did? You know, how hard is all this? This is hard. Why? Remnants. Karma. Anger is a Holocaust waiting to happen. Of course, I may be wrong. This is the thing. Don't believe any of this. Think about it. Work it through. See what you come up with. Don't believe anything. Check it out. Very important. But when you check it out, you know, it becomes a wee bit uncomfortable because the truth of it kind of rises up in you and you think, oh my Lord. Not me, because I'm just so nice. What else was coming up in your discussion? What about this uncertainty with relationships?
Well, we actually have the other point out that it is easier for us to actually to see good in evil persons than to see emptiness in the one who are very close to us.
Yes.
With that label of mother or child.
Yes, yes.
That is a very difficult.
Very, very difficult. One of the most difficult to see sentient beings as having been your mother is one of the most. There's only, they say there's two very, very difficult things to come to grips with in the Dharma. One is seeing all sentient beings as being your mother. And two is to see your guru as an enlightened being. That's what they say. That's what they say. And if you go back to this, you'll see that this, when it comes to the method and the wisdom aspect, there's nothing in the wisdom aspect that says anything about recognizing mothers as being having been your mother. All sentient beings as being your mother. This is all in the methodology part. Yet it's included in the combining because it is so effective. So it's worth dipping into this quite often because it is very effective. But for some people, this never really works. And so they go into other things. They're happy to go into other things. But it's worth dipping your toe in this because it is.
I'm just thinking, like, what if you don't have all these positive feelings about your mom? I was just gonna ask.
Yes, yes, that comes up a lot. Yeah, the Tibetans use mothers because to them nothing is more powerful than mother love. Nothing. They'll say that to you because they'll cite story after story where a mother has laid down their life for their child, gone without. You know, really, nothing like that. And I suppose in Tibet there were a couple of mothers that weren't like that. But I think the Lamas got a bit of a shock when they came to the West to realize there was this type of thing. And I remember Lama Yeshe saying, you know, it's so short-sighted of us to think like this. Because if you look through, if you really go back to when your mother conceived you, Just the fact that she was a host for you means that you have the chance to practice Dharma. Didn't have to do anything else. Just the fact that she was a host. She didn't abort you. You're still here. She didn't starve you to death. She fed you. Or she made sure you went to school. There comes a time in this evolution where something went wrong, for sure. But there's very few people that you can actually say these first few things didn't happen. It's just we don't give them weight. We say, well, that was our job. Being a mother, that was our job. But no, so many things could have happened where actually you were never born. So many situations. So to love your mother, to respect, to thank her for that is very important. But something's happened, usually. And it could be something quite big. That's it. My mother was awful, you know. And if you try and take that person back to some positive times, sometimes they agree, but it doesn't outweigh what happened nastily. What the Dharma says, yes, it does. It does. But then again, occasionally there's situations where none of this positivity comes. And so you're quite at liberty to use another person, another significant other, a father, an adopted mother, something like that. It's possible. However, if it brings up too much negativity, move on. Occasionally dip back in, see how it's going, but move on to, there's plenty of strategies. It's just powerful. It's powerful. See, we don't credit it. Easily your mother could have got rid of you. There was always ways. Always ways. Always ways for you to die early so you're not a nuisance. Always a way to save money, not feed you. Always a way to keep you ignorant and a slave by not sending you to school. This didn't happen in the majority of cases. But we give great weight to something that happened later. And we don't forgive that. You think you haven't done worse? Maybe not in this lifetime, but it is hard. What else came up? What happens if you've got someone in your life that you have a very, very strong attachment to? Do you think then, to have equanimity, you should have that strong attachment to everybody else? Do you think you need to spread that attachment? No. So what would be a reasonable course of offense towards this person that you really like? We'll leave the enemy alone for a bit. But this person that you really like, what would be a reasonable way of behaving? I mean, people say spread the love, but really what you're doing is spreading the attachment, eh? So what's a reasonable way of behaving? Do you stop loving them? Do you stop caring for them? Do you stop going out to dinner with them and having a nice coffee? Do you stop taking joy in their company? No. What do you do then? Because having strong attachment is not equitable. What do you do?
Reduce the attachment.
Yes, how?
I think to me, realizing how much if I take my mother, she is one of the few people in the world that I can get really, really, really mad at.
Oh, really?
Because it's safe and because I expect so much from her.
All right.
So because I love my mother very much, and I am attached to
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
So I expect some things from her, which means that if she doesn't live up to my expectations, I have a reason to get mad.
Yes.
Whereas a person on the street or even an enemy, I would never expect anything from them, so
No.
they can't really get me into that mood.
So being a bit more reasonable would be helpful.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. You see, if you get this right, it's very powerful. If you get it wrong, then a kind of coldness can come. I've seen people try and be equitable and they can come across as being a bit cold. So get it right, that doesn't happen. And by getting it right, what you do is you enjoy the moment and see its nature. Now that sounds difficult, but it's not really. See, it's impermanent. But for the moment, in this moment in time, what joy, what happiness. But it's impermanent. And if you can start to see that in someone that you're very strongly attached to, things loosen. Things loosen a bit. It doesn't reduce your joy. It doesn't reduce your compassion or your love. That's not reduced. What's reduced is the tightness. And if you're tight with one thing, it means you're not really encompassing anything else. So enjoying the moment, being in the moment, and see its nature. It's very fluid. Very fluid. That's very helpful. And you can actually enjoy it more because you're enjoying it with a wee bit of wisdom. Because what hurts when a friend becomes an enemy is because you thought it was so permanent, so real. This person in and of itself was a naturally arising, independently existing friend. OMG, what happened? They're now an independently arising, solid entity enemy. So you make the same mistake, but coming at it from the other end. That's what you do. And the interesting thing is, you have space then for other people, not just for enemies, interestingly, because most people don't have that many enemies. Yeah. But it makes space for the rest of the population. If you think about it, you can usually count friends, I mean real friends, on your hands. You don't even have to employ your toes, really. Real friends. If you were then going to count how many people you dislike, there's, really not that many. What happens to the rest of the 7 billion people on this planet? How do you see them? How do you see them?
And all our time just on those 7.
Sure.
7 people.
Totally tied up this, and it's not even real. And then if you start thinking about it, what about the other realms of existence? I mean, I don't know if you understand the other realms of existence, but there's other realms of existence. They don't even come into it. Okay, maybe you like a few animals, but there'll be animals you like and there'll be animals you don't like. Same thing. Being partial, having these kind of categories that you see as impermanent is so limiting. It's self-limiting. You would not go into a desert, build yourself a cage, climb in and throw the key as far as you could and sit there. You wouldn't do it. But we do it all the time. This is what we do. All the time. Yeah. Anything else coming up? I'm going to let you go for a break in a minute, so everybody cheer up, okay?
Okay, I hope this is not too stereotypical, but recognizing, for example, the mother is an archetype. So in not my mother, but my girlfriend. So recognizing that I might be projecting an archetype onto another person. So a mother or another kind of archetype in cross-cultural aspects. So recognizing this is an archetype and not the person.
Okay.
Separating the two.
Okay. So from psychology, this word archetype comes. From a Dharma point of view, they would use the word concept. And you're absolutely right. You don't see what's there. You see a concept. And one of the qualities of a concept is that you see things through a veil. You don't see things as they are. You see things through a kind of veil, a mist, a generic image. In your mind, a genetic image. You're not seeing what's there. You're seeing a genetic image of what's there, like an archetype. And of course, the more you study, the more you meditate, the less real those concepts appear. And then you start to get glimpses of perception. Perception, seeing things as they are. Without the concepts start to die down. It's not real, you know. None of it's real. It's a complete fantasy. I don't know if you've ever seen The Matrix, but it's like The Matrix, really. We create this world, which is based on ignorance, and then we believe 100% in it. And because we believe 100% in it, we work towards maintaining it, thinking we've got some sort of control, and we create all our own suffering, all of it. It would be so easy to blame someone else.
So this labeling is about finding balance all the time.
I think that's a quality. I think that's a quality. Yeah. Suck it and see.
This need of finding this balance all the time.
Yes.
That's a kind of
Yeah.
control.
Well, yes, but it's not. But it's more to do with, you see, this balance, this mind that's in balance has got a real chance with meditation. This mind that's not being agitated one way, on being sleepy and ignoring other things, but kind of in balance. This is a mind that's got a good chance with meditation. This is a mind that's got a good chance with developing equanimity. Balance is really sensible, really sensible. Not only is it sensible, it is the natural state of the mind. We're going back to the truth of it. Everything else is choppy waters. But the mind, what is it? It's clarity and awareness. It's nothing more than that. Its nature is clarity. And clarity is in itself balanced. Its function is simply to be aware. Balance. That's it. That's what the mind is. Everything else is like an elaboration. And that's why balance is so soothing to the mind. That's why it's so soothing to the mind. Because you're going back to the truth of it. Anyway, time for a coffee break. So please take 20 minutes. I live in hope. Thank you.